also develops. The existence of the internet and social media has a tremendous impact on our social interactions and engagement. Our relations has become more complex, entails diverse combinations of communication patterns with various modes and media. To provide you a comparative analysis of communication pattern between Europe and ASEAN, our first topic will be discussed by Professor Alexander Loch from University of Applied Science, Ludwigsburg, Germany. He is a psychologist, social anthropologist, as well as a musician. And his research interests include migrations, governance, transnational social work, also sustainability and development cooperations. I believe Professor Alex already familiar with Indonesia since he had supported Ministry of Finance of Indonesia several years ago on issues of fiscal decentralizations. And Prof. Alex was also once a guest lecturer at Universitas Papua at Manokwari. So he will give us the perspective of communication patterns from Europe. And then our next speaker will be Mrs. Bevaula Kusumasari, PhD, that we used to call Bu Ola. She is a lecturer in Department of Public Policy and Management, Universitas Gadjah Mada. Her expertise are public policy, public management, and disaster management. She will bring us to explore big data with the topic titled Analysis of Twitter Communication Pattern During Pandemic in Indonesia. However, before we starting our discussions today, please let me invite Professor Wahyudi Kumorotomo as the head of Department of Public Policy and Management, Universitas Gadjah Mada, to give opening remarks today. Professor Kum, time is yours.
Thank you, Unique, and also distinguished professors, distinguished speakers. Here we have Professor Alexander Loch and Dr. Bevaula Kusumasari for the speakers. And I'm personally glad to join this discussion. And when we talk about the communication patterns across the countries, we talk about ASEAN and Europe. What we have seen so far is that people only tend to talk only about those that are, having authorities, formal, positions in the government to talk among the countries, represent the countries. But we sometimes neglect or, it's not enough considering the people-to-people communication, citizen-to-citizen communication, while at the same time, of course, this is something that can forge the relations among countries. So I suppose that this topic will be very much interesting because Professor Alex is already know Indonesia for a couple of decades, probably, because the first time we met with Professor Alex, he seems to be familiar with many places in Indonesia. And of course, we have Bu Ola, who will be talking about the patterns of, social media communication, how people actually use this media for, of course, we hope that everything that is going on in social media will support more productive society. But the issue, of course, is very much important. So on behalf of the Department of Public Policy and Management, I would like to thank for your time, especially for Professor Alexander Loch and Bu Ola. And for all the participants, please do not hesitate to raise questions, to exchange your opinions in this international online seminar, because the topic is very much important, and I suppose you will get the more information and more benefit, academic benefit from this session. Thank you so much, and back to you, Unique.
Thank you very much, Prof. Kum. So we are moving now to our main discussions to save the time. Let's just start by inviting Professor Alex. Professor Alex, you have 20 minutes. Yeah, okay, time is yours, Professor.
Thank you very much. Yeah, good morning from Germany and selamat siang to Indonesia. As you know already, my name is Alexander Loch. I'm a German psychologist and anthropologist, and I'm a full-time professor at the University of Applied Science Ludwigsburg for Finance and Administration. And Universitas Gadjah Mada, the MKP, recently engaged in some cooperation. And I particularly would like to thank Professor Kum and Professor Suripto to make that happen and invite me to share with you today some ideas about comparing communication in Southeast Asia and in Europe. And we're talking about interpersonal communication. Ya, 12 tahun yang lalu saya mengajar sebagai dosen tamu di Universitas Papua Negeri di Manokwari. Terus saya masih bisa mengerti sedikit bahasa Indonesia. Tetapi this is an international lecture. Take this as a kursus bahasa Inggris gratis. We people in Germany have not the chance. We have not the chance to learn any Asian languages at the university. So we simply take English. 80% of the world literature is in English, the academic literature. Yeah, what will you learn today? I would like to share with you some cross-cultural communication theories and apply them to contexts from Indonesia and Germany and extend that also to ASEAN and European perspectives. Since you know, Germany and Indonesia have several things in common. Indonesia is by far the most important country in ASEAN in terms of population and size and economy. And the same applies probably to Germany in the European Union. So I sit here in Bonn, the former capital of West Germany, in the oldest house of Bonn, 400 years old. It looks a little bit like a joglo in Java. And what you should maybe know about me is my specialization is really actually international capacity development. So before becoming a professor at university, I spent 20 years of my life in Asia, Europe, worked with the United Nations. I had the pleasure to work with Kementerian Keuangan, but also Universitas Indonesia, UGM, Samratulangi, Andalas, Hasanuddin. So I have been literally from Sabang to Merauke, and my wife is Australian. My son is born in Paris. I studied in Nepal. So yeah, our international affairs is my thing. I have been in all ASEAN countries. I had in my life to be in 60 countries. I had to learn 9 languages. Down here in the picture, you see me at the TOT, Training of Trainers in Yogyakarta 10 years ago. And at the right side, when I was working with the World Bank, before specializing on multi-level governance, here I was quite locally engaged in Timor. And what I find always fascinating during all my missions internationally is the question, when people from different cultures communicate, how is communication actually influenced by culture? And what is considered normal in EU or in ASEAN? And when people really engage in, nations engage in cooperation, what works and what not in international kerjasama? So let's define. When we talk about communication, I mean now the interpersonal communication. I'm not talking about ICT, information communication technology, but even there you see, and we will hear that in the second part from Ibu Birola, there are differences when you see how long people spend on social media in January 2021. In the Philippines, 4 hours, 50 minutes per day. In Germany, only €1 hour 24. But we focus on interpersonal communication. Second concept, EU and ASEAN. You probably are aware where this is geographically located. You know, the ASEAN Secretariat is even in Jakarta. You know that Europe, we have to distinguish Europe as a geographic region and the European Union, which had in the past 28 members, and you're probably aware that 51% of the population in the UK voted to go out of the EU. So in this old chart here, you see 28 members, but de facto we are 27. Both regions are quite connected. There are approximately 10 million people who travel between ASEAN and Europe every year. We talk about Europe, about ASEAN, about communication. But now we go to the point. Interpersonal communication. This is fascinating. You see here the Dinas in Pulau Yapen, and he probably did not know much about Germans. And when I was there, I was just starting to learn Bahasa Indonesia, but we both somehow communicated. And communication is challenging. He built probably hypotheses about this German, say, oh, Alex is 35 and not married. There must be something wrong with him. But it's not wrong. In Germany, it is considered normal. I thought when he told me, we meet next morning at 9 o'clock, I came at 9 o'clock. I never heard about Comparative before, and I was surprised that he was not yet there. He spoke always in a very soft and low voice to me, and I was irritated. I thought Kepler Dinas must be strong and assertive, but he was super and polite, and he had the idea, was non-verbally, he smiled. And I had learned as a researcher must be very serious, so I tried to be super serious while he was smiling, etc. This is what cross-cultural communication is about. And now I have a question to you. We have a chat function here. Can you please tell me 3 things what you know about Europeans and how they communicate? Tulis 3 hal yang Anda ketahui tentang orang-orang Eropa dalam Zoom chat. For example, when I asked my students, what do they know about people in ASEAN communication, they probably would write things like, they usually eat sticky rice, selalu sopan, or people have 5 to 6% economic growth. We know something about each other. Silakan, please write in the chat what you know about Europeans' communication in Europe. Curious what you will write. Please don't hesitate. Silakan. So far, I don't read anything. Direct, talk straight to the point. Interesting. Individualist, tidak suka basi-basi, sangat menghargai privasi. Super good points. It seems some of you traveled already to Europe or read the literature on time concept, individualist. These are exactly the things we are going to talk about now. Let me start with introducing you some artwork from an artist called Yang Liu. She is Asian, came with 14 to Europe, returned as meanwhile professor in Beijing, China, and she had a series of artwork, blue and red, contrasting Europe and Asia. I show you a quick film, which is 1 minute only, and you will see there the idea of this work from here. I hope that the sound quality is good, but it's not so dramatic. So I assume you realized, yeah, they're basically stereotypes. Stereotypes are assumption about a group of people, fixed images, but of course, in this artwork, there's also some wisdom in it, and I will link that now to you, for you, with scientific research findings about differences in Europe and ASEAN. When you take this here, of course, I mean, believe me, I'm not every day drinking beer and eating sausages, but the idea that Slavic and German cultures prefer 2 times a day a cold meal, while you would say, usually when I'm hungry, I really need some good rice and I need some socialization together with people and eating warm. Yeah, there's some wisdom in it. But let's go to this. This is really proven by research. Individualism versus collectivism. In Europe, the individual is considered as very important. When I have 2 kids, they both claim they want to have their individual room. In Asia, you find cultures who stress more loyalty, being collective. Think about, for example, gotong royong. After work, I have to go home, and Europeans like to go home and be alone, maybe only the core family around them. Or they never would have the idea to go out and bergaul and hang out in bigger groups. In Asian countries, cohesion is preferred. You can measure these differences. Famous psychologist Gerd Hofstede, already 40 years ago, had questionnaires, gave them to all IBM employees at that time, and compared the data with then some statistical analysis and found significant differences how individualism and collectivism is distributed worldwide. So what does that mean, for example, for student exchange? When you go to Germany as a student and you find a culture which has low power distance and high individualism, yeah, teachers say, oh, in Germany, the students are so naughty to their teacher, but they're educated like that. They shall be independent, critical thinking. This is what is stressed in this society. Networking. You guys probably live in the best networked part of this world. For you, it's not, for you, relationship management is considered as important. And this is researched by Marcus and Kitayama with the idea of the independent and the interdependent self. You find this research quite simple. You ask people to complete a test, a sentence, starting with I am. So I can say, for example, I am a psychologist, I am a musician, I am educated, I am modern, critical. Very typical for European. I could also say, I'm a father of 2 children, I'm a professor of my university, I'm a pianist in my folk rock ensemble, and relate myself to the group where I consider myself as being a part myself as part of the others. And this you find rather seldom in Europe and more in Asian cultures. And you can imagine then when a German, for example, has to learn Bahasa Indonesia, they have big problems to distinguish what is kami and what is kita because they don't have such concepts in mind. Time concepts. We distinguish in research monochrone and polychrone cultures. Poly with a lot of time parallel action, which you can parallel process. Germans want to queue in one line, do one thing after the other. I think in Asia, you have this timeless importance of places like Borobudur, Bagan, Angkor Wat, or so. In the West, you have more these ideas, which we teach our children also. You must be punctual. Punctuality is super important and not so much about culture of Borobudur or other places. Again, research. Polychrone and monochrone time concepts were investigated by Robert Levin. He went to many countries and took 3 indicators. He measured how exact are the public clocks, How long does it take when someone goes in the main pedestrian line, 100 meter? And how long does it take to buy a stamp at the post office? And with these three indicators, he calculated and found, oh, there are significant differences how speedy countries are. Number one was overall speed was, interestingly, Switzerland. And I was not surprised that then Germany was quite number three. And you will find there, and it's quite evident, when it becomes hotter in terms of temperatures, climate, the speed of life also gets a little bit slower. Another good investigated concept, which is important for communication, is the idea of what is a good boss. In German administration, German business, people don't like to have a BAPAC. They have the idea there must be a primus inter pares, as they call it, just someone who is a little bit more competent. That is the ideal boss, and you can imagine this relates also to the concept of individualism and collectivism. Research. Shalom Schwartz in 2012 had the probably biggest worldwide comparative research on values, many countries, and he interestingly found out, yes, there are differences, but there are also universal structures in human value. So wherever you go, people who like more power probably also like more security and more achievement orientation. So there's both cross-cultural variance, but also structural similarity. And this you find in many different investigations of some particular research, for example, luxury spending. This is more sociological research about the different milieus inside the countries, but it seems in Germany, UK, Switzerland, Spain, Italy, people don't like to spend in average more on luxury, while you find this more, for example, in Malaysia and Indonesia. This is a very important nearly last one, are dealing with problems. You know, some of you wrote it already in the chat. You say, people are more straight. Yeah, what means more? I mean, look for some Batak people, they're also langsung, no? But they are inside the culture. When you compare it here, the blue and the red, as you did it, Germans, when there's a problem, say, okay, then let's talk about it. Is there a conflict? Okay, then let's talk about it and address it. And then I don't say this is better, it's different. Because, for example, Germany can learn a lot from ASEAN in dealing with problems. This is here from German newspapers, and you find this currently a lot, that people say, oh, Corona treatment. In Asia, people had so much more experience already with Asian flu, with SARS. They were much better prepared. People accepted to wear masks. In Germany was very slow, the long debates in the parliament, etc. So in terms of dealing with problems, again, some variation. You saw this picture about emotion. Well, we consider in Europe anger as something valid and respected, which is okay, to get something done, while a lot of Asian countries have this idea of face, of malu, losing face. You would not shout out loud in a group. Research. There are universal emotions. You find, Ekman experienced that or found that very early, anger, fear, disgust, sadness, surprise, and joy in every culture, which has simply to do with the fact we are Homo sapiens. We have a certain number of muscles which we can contract, and then you can see if I'm smiling and I'm happy. But what I'm happy about, this is culturally different. And the display rules, if it is appropriate now to smile or not to smile. See here in Europe, left, Catalonia, he's angry, looking for independence. See here in the middle, Myanmar, the recent political developments here, people are also angry. And we understand it, that they're angry when we are from Indonesia and Germany. Look here at the gentleman from Suku Dani in Wamena. When I showed him pictures from German people who are angry, he said, yes, yes, this is probably someone who has a pig which is going through the garden and is destroying the garden. He immediately could explain me what someone is feeling in terms of anger. So there is the idea, anger is universal, it exists, but the reasons why people are angry are culturally different. Last slide, very important, direct versus indirect. Direct communication, getting straight to the point, is the one preferred mode of the blue. The red would say, and you experience that probably often, that people are meander around, talk about a topic for hours, and not langsung and so krass, but you would consider the blue as sometimes very krass. And this is then called the so-called low context cultures. You know directly what they mean. When you go to Tim and someone says in Bahasa Tetum, Bahasa Daerah, dort, a sentence like Nia ha dominia can mean he loves her, can also mean she loves him, or he loves him. You need the context, a high context culture. Low context cultures in Germany also, people read in grammar also very exactly what is meant and don't need other indicators. They like to be explicit and not implicit. So what does that all mean for communication when people work together and in the future? You know, maybe OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, very good place for policy development. And they say, well, what is needed in the future is global competence, a skill set that people are able to open, appropriate, effective interaction across cultures. And they measure that. When you do policy research, go to their database, particularly from the PISA study, the so-called Program for International Student Assessment. And there they measured global competence in the 38 OECD countries. And interestingly, Singapore outperforms them. This is much stronger, meanwhile, developed here. And these are probably the capacities needed in the next generation. Last theory. What I find very convincing is to say, hey, we must not say there's red and blue or the Germans or the Indonesians. We must better think about standards, that there are certain standards on what ways of perceiving, thinking, valuing, acting that the majority of members of a particular culture regard as normal, typical, binding for themselves and others. And when you have this normality concept, then you have also this normality curve, the standard curve. You see, for example, the standard at the left side. Yes, Germans eat bread. Standard B, Indonesians prefer rice. But not every Indonesian eats all the time rice and the German only right. No, there is these points left and right. There's variation within the culture. And some Germans eat vielleicht even more rice. So they would be at the right side. And you find also this overlapping area between the two curves. Huh? You find, yesterday I saw a gamelan rock group saying, yeah, we actually combine and we take music preferences here from another culture and mix them up. So there is intercultural overlap. And there is within the culture, variance, which is evident to you. Bali is different from Java. Papua, you cannot compare to Aceh. Just to say, yeah, all ASEAN people are similar. Not at all. You must see at the intra-cultural variation. And then you come to something what is better than red and blue. This is simple contrasting. It's more these profiles that you remember the Kepaladinas and me, when you have there this profile and say, Alex, maybe a little bit more like that, and he is a little bit more like that, then you're closer to reality. Then people can cooperate. And I hope that you will experience that in the future yourself. You did probably, but my recommendation is, hey, come once in a while to Europe. I mean, yes, it's always the question of the ticket, but once you're in Europe, there's so many possibilities for cooperation. So what to do when you're a student or PhD student or postdoc and you want to go to Europe, go first at UGM at your website and you find there this Erasmus program. Erasmus is a famous European humanist from 15th century. And there are already ongoing Erasmus programs. And another link I want to give you, which you may have not heard about, is the German Academic Exchange Service, DAAD. When you go on their webpage in English, you find a big, big database of scholarships, not only to Germany, but everywhere in Europe. So I hope to see you soon in Europe. This was my short input at this point, and I'm happy to receive any questions, or you can mail me if you like. Here is my name and address in the chat. And I hand over to our moderator if we next have a direct input or if we shall discuss.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. Alex. It's such an interesting illustrations that Professor Alex provide us. It's like hit myself to some point, like, okay, to be punctual, while most of Indonesians is too flexible for the related to time. And then how we used to be indirect or implicitly, not like the European that tend to be more direct or explicit. So, but it is also related into why this is so important, because it is also related into the global competence where it is needed to consider this kind of cross-cultural interaction. So thank you for the insight and the enlightenment, Professor. So now we are moving to Indonesia. Bu Ola, please, 20 minutes. Time is yours.
Hai Prof. Alex, apa kabar? Okay, yeah, thank you for giving me the chance to present my study this year. So for the last 3 years, I have so many involvement with big data analytics, and then just like Prof. Alex, I love to analyze how the discourse pattern appear in Twitter. So during the last 3 years, so I figure out the communication pattern in all disasters in Indonesia. And now during the pandemic, I also do the same thing. So this is the background of the study. So we understand the pandemic caused so many damage, and then also change our lives, change how we learn, change how we communicate, change we live, and many, many other things. And of course, Indonesia, or mostly the last 7 days, the last a week, we become the most high level of COVID-19 cases in ASEAN, in ASEAN countries. And we have so many fatalities, and then these fatalities eventually generated various reactions. And Twitter becoming the platform that makes netizens in Indonesia easily express their concern about many things. It is understood easily that Twitter users in Indonesia reach almost 12 million. And we become the 9th rank in the world and the 3rd place in Asia. And why we think that people use platforms such as Twitter during the crisis, during the disaster, or during the pandemic? Because it is fast, it offers adequate support to get the information flow. And then we as like netizens, we have the easy access to exchange the information during the pandemic or emergency. Communication, of course, playing an important role in crisis stages. And then if like government understand this carefully, they will use many platforms of social media to become the way they spread the information. So because I think it is interesting to see how people interact, how people discuss during the pandemic. So I'm trying to figure out not only how they communicate, but the message behind the discourse, so the hidden discourse behind the text. And then actually it shows some pattern, some social element about COVID-19 pandemic in Indonesia. So what did I do? I'm using what we call here CADS, Corpus Assisted Discourse Analysis. So it's actually a perspective that has two combined perspectives. First, the content analysis, and second, the critical discourse analysis. Why this is important? Because by understanding CADS, we can get the idea about the ideology behind some text. So I gathered data from Twitter from 2 March until 31 March 2020. Why I choose this date? Because this is the beginning of the COVID-19 case outbreak in Indonesia. And then I gather almost 1.5 million tweets. And then if we got into one file, it consists of 16 megabytes. So when I open in the Excel, it takes quite a long time because it's so heavy, because the data is so heavy. And this is the keyword that I use. I use like the keyword personal protective equipment, or we call here APD in Indonesia, COVID-19 spokesperson, lockdown, shortage of face mask, Minister of Health, handling COVID-19, President, social distancing, work from home. And of course, the Twitter used here in Bahasa Indonesia. And then this is some of the words that emerged in the Twitter during the first month of pandemic. And what did I find? It is quite interesting. I found the 3 groups of discourse in my study. First, most of the Twitter users discuss about disaster mitigation. And also, they also discuss about the main actors of medical personnel and Indonesian National Police, and also about divinity. Discourse on mitigation. I found that the words that often appear in Twitter during the first month of outbreak is about preventing the spread prevention, community behavior, wash hands, social distancing, and hand sanitizer. It is all about under the discourse of disaster mitigation. And also, there are 2 main actors mostly discussed in the Twitter narrative. The first is about the medical personnel, and we found words such as frontliner workers, doctors, nurses, or medical volunteers. And also under the Indonesian National Police, or Polri, we found words that often appeared, including notice of the head of Polri, Indonesia Polri anticipate corona. And last one about the discourse on divinity. So it is quite interesting. I got like many cases of disaster in Indonesia, and all of the narrative found in the disaster in Twitter is about divinity. So like Allah glory to him was the most mentioned in Twitter. And what does it mean actually about disaster mitigation first? We know that after internet developed so massively, we become flooded by new media. And in terms of disaster, we understand that new media play substantial role in the process of disaster mitigation. Why? Because new media can be a tool to disseminate information during disaster, and then it can also accelerate the process of communication and information in many areas, in many organizations of people. And my study also saw that the restriction of verification of information were often carried out by individuals or groups among the public itself. So instead of by government, we still found that information carried out by individuals is the most appeared in the case of Twitter. Main actors in disaster. At least 2 main actors who often become topic of conversation: medical personnel and policemen. Medical personnel, we understand that becoming one of the group that holds a crucial role and are directly involved in the process of COVID-19 response. And amidst the pandemic, medical personnel are positioned in a particular environment that transform their life into abnormal one. And we can find here many pictures also show how netizens are giving the appreciation to the medical personnel. So they support very much to the medical personnel. And this condition is corroborated by Twitter conversation collected in the study, which put medical personnel as the spotlight in relation to handling the COVID-19. And this is some words that are found in the various narratives on Twitter, such as medis berjuang or medical workers fight on, medis relawan, medical volunteers, garda terdepan or frontline workers are the forms of support provided by various parties to the struggling of medical workers in Indonesia. And also we found like many people doing the fundraising activities, which is aimed to get so many medical equipment such as personal protective equipment or APD, face mask, and others. And then this is often carried out in the Twitter. And we have so many numerous positive response from various groups to support the lack of medical personnel and also to educate the public of the vital role in the process of combating COVID-19. The thing that is interesting is about the role of policy, Indonesia National Police, Kepolisian Republik Indonesia or Polri. It is also having a main discussion on the Twitter on the first month of COVID pandemic. And then why? Because Polri plays extremely crucial of upholding the law during the state of pandemic. So because we have a government regulation and it requires the strict discipline, and then people rely on the Polri. So that's why Polri become frontline professional in the effort of preventing COVID-19. The Polri and of course all the rank and file are tasked to maintain public order, to get people to be disciplined. Also, they are coordinating what we call here National Disaster Agency or BNPB and TNI or Indonesian National Armed Forces, and also the regional government. Divinity, is everybody when they face disaster, they enhance their individual belief in the existence of divine being, probably mostly in Asia. And this belief is reinforced with the appearance of various conversations in the Twitter, such as get closer to Allah, mendekatkan Allah, I hope Allah, semoga Allah, and let us pray, mari berdoa. And this kind of conversation appear mostly in the COVID-19 pandemic in Indonesia. And why this also happened because individuals in Indonesia commonly use religious terms or engage in religious activities in response to dealing with unexpected events such as disaster or pandemic. So we have missed to Idul Fitri because we don't have such events normally. So it's such like so many local religious leaders try to calming the people that we should accept this condition and many things. And divinity narrative means that we are employing calming narrative. So it's provenly helping people to accepting this condition. So yeah, by like having social distancing and physical distancing, now we have so many events, religious events using Zoom to get live ceremony or to get live sermon from the national religious leader. So it's easy for us now to get the education about like Islam or many other religions. And it is becoming calming narrative because it explains that a person belief in God progressively intensifies during disaster. And religious activities or narrative may shape public perception in facing disaster. And in divinity narrative, it is considered as an easy means to direct public opinions and sense amidst a state of disaster due to the rising sense of fear, panic experienced by the people. So it's quite interesting. And we have found various words or hashtags referring to the ideology of religious activity that provide emotional, social support to the victims of disaster and may later improve the psychological well-being after experiencing this crisis or pandemic. So Prof. Alex, we found here frequently that after probably our family got like difficulty in terms of disaster, and then we hold a sermon in Zoom, and then we pray together. We send some prayer to the people. So it's commonly becoming practice in Indonesia. So yeah, I think that's all about the narrative of conversation in Twitter during the first pandemic outbreak in Indonesia. So Eunice, thank you very much. And now your turn. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Bu Ola. It's such an interesting findings, ya, Bu. So far our citizen or our people is still like religious maybe, because you find a lot of like divinity, maybe come closer to Allah, etc. So of course, we realize and we experience how the pandemic changed our life in every aspect. So however, this kind of social media such as Twitter, maybe not only Twitter, maybe Facebook or Instagram, make citizens of Indonesia easily express their feeling and opinion, right? So like the government can use this kind of media to spread informations. And of course, this kind of social media easily to interact, it's cheaper, it's also borderless. So it will affect how people discuss and interact. The finding is also interesting because Bu Ola emphasized on 3 points. First is about related to the disaster mitigations. And then the other is about the actors involved. And then of course about the divinity. The Twitter play a substantial role in disaster mitigations, accelerate the process of communications and disseminating informations. Thank you, Bu Ola. Now we are moving to questions and answer sessions. We are now having 62 participants here. So maybe you can raise your hand and I can allow you to unmute and ask your questions to whoever, like maybe Bu Ola or Professor Alexander. No one want to ask? Please raise your hand. Or if you, maybe you, okay, we have one here. Please raise your hand. Oh, cannot see you. Okay, Mbak Freska, you can unmute. Is it possible for you to unmute? Yeah, yes. Please.
All right. First of all, I would like to say thank you for the enlightening presentation to Professor Alexander Loh and Ibu Ola. So I think it's really interesting to see how the diversity in the culture. Now, my question goes first to Professor Alexander Loh. In your view, how does the cultural diversity affect in decision making? So I think this is very, very important, particularly when you learn public policy, because this might be different compared to ASEAN and also European Union. And the second question goes to Ibu Ola. It's also, for me, kind of, how to say, I'm really feel a bit light when I listen to your presentations. Now, I would love to see maybe to get some a bit of overview from you. Um, the research you conducted related to Twitter, can you just give a bit of overview, probably? What is the most challenging part that you experienced during the research? Because this might be give some also another point of view, because everybody has different experience in terms of research. So thank you very much. And yeah, I give over to you all.
Okay, thank you, Mbak Freska. Now we're moving to the next questions. Maybe we collect the question first, and then Prof. Alex and Bu Ola can answer it directly. The second is from Mas Nur Khozin. Yes, please unmute, and then you can ask directly. Mas Nur Khozin, can you unmute? Wait. Hello? Now is it missing or something? Okay, or maybe we can start to answer the questions first before from Professor Alex.
Yes, thank you, Ibu Friska, for this question about culture and decision making, and relating that into Ibu Ola's presentation about Twitter. What comes to my mind is decision making is a cognitive process, and of course, culture shapes cognitive processes. And when people get under stress, they become particularly German when they are German, and they become very Indonesian when they're Indonesian. Under stress, people regress to their cultural background. So when Indonesia got under stress, I think a lot of people Twittered. They have reactivated their networks, their social networks. And I find that very evident. And then I thought about my friends. I assume in Germany also Twitter would go a little bit up, but not very much. Then I thought, what were the Germans doing when COVID became more and more cases? And I'm very ashamed to tell you the truth. You know, people were buying more toilet paper. They were running to the supermarket and thought, oh, we probably have a lockdown. And then what are they buying? Not some more rice, some more food that will be there. But someday they bought more toilet paper. You know, in European system, they don't have a Monday, but there's a toilet paper. And they thought, oh, that will be a crisis. And during crisis, we need toilet paper. And then they were joking about the French, you know, our neighbors. I'm sure in Indonesia, you have jokes about the Malaysians or the Filipinos. The Germans have jokes about the French. And they were saying, well, let's look what the French are buying. And the French didn't buy toilet paper. They were buying red wine and condoms that they think when they are at home, then they, according to stereotypes, engage. So when it comes to decision-making and culture, yes, it is linked somehow to this idea. The decisions you make are based on your values. What are your values? Is what you're transmitted in childhood, what your parents told you, how you should act under stress, or to be good in school, or if you shall be a performer, or shall you be independent, or did your parents tell you don't be malu, don't be too offensive to others, respect them, yeah, I think this is the link. Value influence decision making. Stress makes people to act according to their culturally established patterns, as we have seen also with Ibu Ola. And I also would like to thank her one more time. I found it very interesting to learn about what and how is twittered in Indonesia.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Alex. Maybe Bu Ola want to answer the questions from Mbak Freska.
Okay, so this is quite challenging in doing the 1.5 million Twitter. So since I saw you here, this is just an example. So this is, can you see it? Okay, here. This is the tweet, the text from the Twitter. So imagine this is 1.5, and then we put this word into the source name Ancon. Ancon. So we put the tools, everything here, put it in Ancon, and then they will have they will have this word, many words. Hang on, I saw you. Here, the word. The first word, second word, and the third word. So it's many things. This is just example of some small parts. So I read one by one whether this word has a meaning. So I classify this word. So I just read one by one, and it takes quite a long time. And then I classify into like here. Also, I classify, okay, Twitter social distancing, this is just an example. Okay, the actor, the first actor, and then the second actor for the ketuhanan and something like that. So this is the thing that I did. So it takes it takes time, of course, and then we also need to have the good concept, like if this word come up, like pencegahan, penyebaran, it can be classified into one big concept. That's the role of the author, the researcher. Yeah, this one. So yeah, Prof. Alex, that's correct. We found out that many conversations during the first month of COVID pandemic in the world is about the lack of toilet paper, and also in the United States, the second week of the pandemic, they are running out of the hair coloring. So it's quite interesting to find out the discourse behind the facts. Yeah, that's the thing that I did, Mbak Priska, and probably so I spent just mostly like a week to see one by one word, whether it makes sense, and then it can be classified into one big concept. Well, yeah, but that's the most interesting part, I think, to find the ideology behind this discourse. Thank you, Mbak Yuni.
Okay, thank you, Bola. It's interesting to analyze 1.4 million tweet, right? Oh, it's so challenging. So, and of course, it's tiring, maybe. Like, okay, we are moving to Miss Nur Hosin. I will allow you to speak directly, Mas Hosin.
Okay.
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you so much for the opportunity. And I'm so sorry for not turning my camera on due to the unstable connection. And thank you so much for the very amazing insight and enlightenment that have been delivered. It becomes something intriguing for me to understand the communication style in Europe and Asian from two different perspectives, as are in personal communication and big data approach. And my question will be addressed to Bu Ola. As we know that Twitter users, especially in Indonesia, are being segmented to particular group as in their age. And we see that the Twitter users are dominated with adolescents. Even we are at the top ranked Twitter user number, the fact remains the same, that it's not fully depict the actual discourse, since outside of Twitter, the actual discourse might different. Let's say about the hoax news that has been spread along in our citizen, which are commonly found from Facebook and WhatsApp instead of Twitter itself. And I do believe that this kind of situation might hinder the credibility of the data when we are trying to use the Twitter as the base, as the research itself. And actually, I have been experiencing this kind of situation when I made a research about Mudik policy, and based on my data, we found that the citizens are actually agree with the mobility restriction or the Mudik ban, and we already know that the fact it tells the opposite ways when a lot of people are tend to disagree with the policy itself. This is something that actually make me afraid to use the Twitter data, because it cannot fully depict the true discourse that's happening in real life itself. And my question is how to maintain this kind of credibility, especially for the Twitter research space. I think that's all for me. Thank you.
Please, Bola.
Okay, Cousin, thank you for the question. Well, doing the big data analytics, we must follow some protocol. So like the 1.5 million, so we need to, what we call here data naturalization. So we clean whether the user of Twitter is the real person or the real organization. It's not like the buzzer or like the Zong or no. So that's the real person, the real user. And then for analyzing Twitter in disaster is commonly used compared to other platforms like Facebook or Instagram. So it's most convenient platform to gather information about disaster is from Twitter, because Twitter also providing this is fast, and then they just need a word without a picture. So it makes people rely on the Twitter. In terms of disaster, you can find many international articles provided information related the use of Twitter in terms of disaster. So so many protocols to be followed for doing this one. And then we need to clean out the data, and then of course takes many times to do that. Before I do the one that I show you, but the Excel table is coming from the cleaning process first. So it's just, yeah, when you you need to clarify whether it is true or not true, we sometimes using the analysis from the online media to make it clear whether this issue is clearly discussed in the Twitter as well as the online news media. And then I found some of my study in Palu, they have the word menggugurkan kandungan, and then also obat penggugur kandungan. And I was feeling, oh, what happened in Palu during the tsunami, and then the Twitter discourse mentioning about obat penggugur kandungan. What happened in this situation? And then I found in the BBC research, there is many people, many young people using the rumah singgah, temporary shelter, after their family moves to the main house, and then it's empty, and then they use the place for doing the things, and then they become pregnant. Then that's why the discourse about the obat penggugur kandungan becoming appear in the Twitter. So of course we need to clarify with other sources. So, but don't worry to use the Twitter as the main data. Of course, in every data they have weakness and then strength.
Thank you, Bola. It's very interesting explanations, because we can assess or we can understand the reality during the disaster from the Twitter or from the keywords that emerge in online or in internet. So because our time is limited, I will move into the last questions for Professor Alex. It is from Mbak Hikmah. Do differences in individual and collective nature between Europe and Asia affect the speed of decision making? And how can Europeans be simultaneously individualistic while and democratic at the same time?
So we said there is significant difference in a lot of research about individualism and collectivism, and you can relate that now to other variables, like, for example, speed in decision making. Personally, I do not know any research about the speed of decision making, but more about the planning, which is a kind of another cognitive process related to our decision making. And in planning behavior, there you find indeed differences that are the planning, for example, in Germany is extremely long, People discuss, plan. They are from the suku of planners, and then they run in one direction. This is widely known and well researched, while, for example, I know it myself working with Americans, they plan a little bit and then they say, okay, we go and we try out. And then when they said error, they go in another direction. Therefore, the startup scene, the IT sector, so which needs this trial and error, is quite elaborated there. When it comes to the linkage of individualism, collectivism, I would assume, but this is more a hypothesis, that the group thinking in groups who are used to live in bigger families is more stronger. When you think about a problem which a government has to solve, bringing together a group of thinkers and coming up with a group solution, I assume people who are used already to be stronger in groups perform higher than people from societies where the one intellectual is still the ideal. Goethe, Schiller, Beethoven, the individuals who go down home, write their masterpiece of piano, and later on Beethoven performs it, which is more the individualistic approach. But this is more linking now evidence to your question. But where I'm very sure is when it comes to planning, there are significant cultural differences already well investigated.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Prof. Alex. Since our time is up, now it's time to summarize our discussions today. Previously, thank you very much for Prof. Alex and Bu Ola. We're in these discussions, we have this enlightenment, especially at least for me, like how this kind of from Professor Alex we learn how the culture will affect the way we are doing the communications, and also our value will also affect how we build communications and interactions to the other. The challenge is when we try to interact with another person from another part of the world, and maybe we have a different value, and how to make it works, or how can we make it effectively works. And then from Bu Ola, we learn specifically from case of Indonesia, how this social media or new media that previously there's no social media before, but from the social media we can learn how the information is now spread very quick. It's also challenging because some of the information may be false or fake informations, but it is still help us to build interactions and to learn what really happened in the reality. Thank you very much for Professor Alex and Bu Ola for the enlightenment, and for the participants who wants to get the e-certificate, you can fill the form that already put in the chat column. And I hope our discussions today will be useful. You can also contact Professor Alex and Bu Ola directly for further discussions and communications. Professor Alex already provide his contact previously in chat column. And thank you very much for today, and please stay healthy and be happy. Thank you.
To you. All the best.
All the best for you all.
Sampai jumpa.
Sampai bertemu, Prof.
Terima kasih Pak Alex dari Suripto, Pak Alex.
We keep in contact.
Okay, keep in touch via email. Okay.